Hello, and welcome to Don't Mention the Book podcast, where I interview authors who are forbidden from talking about their book. Instead, I hope to delve deep into their past, their influences, and the storytelling tradition from which they were spewed forth. Storytelling has happened for tens of thousands of years before we ever wrote anything down. These stories were essential to keep alive wisdom and warnings. Today, we will find out why stories are so important to Bryan Chaffin and what drove him to work so hard to make his book a success. I won't tell you anything about the author in way of introduction. Instead, we will get to know him through the interview. When we do get to the end, I will reveal the book. However, any mention of the book before then will be punishable by goat. So this is Lucy, and she's a screaming goat. If Bryan does mention his book, she will scream and be very unpleasant for everybody. And I hate gimmicks, so please do not mention book Bryan because I don't want to use that. It'll be a double whammy for everybody. So, and now that I am done with the housekeeping, I would like to give a very warm Irish welcome to my guest, Cade Míle. Bryan, how are you doing today?
Hey man, I'm good. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you at last. We have known each other online for probably over a year now
Over here.
and have been involved in writing group together, have I suppose given advice and feedback on each other's work. And this is the first time we've talked face to face
Yeah.
with, so it's very nice to actually do that for the first time. It's interesting these days with how writing groups can be like that, where you can kind of know somebody really well, but never actually have talked to them face to face. So yeah, really nice to meet you.
It's amazing to meet you too, and I look forward to the goat screaming. No, sorry, that's the opposite. I'm hoping the goat won't
Yeah.
scream.
Okay, yes, we're all hoping the goat won't scream. Okay, so to get things underway, Bryan, I'm just going to ask you a bit about your childhood. And did you, in your friends or family group, did you have any creatives in that group? And if you did, can you tell me a little bit about them and what they did?
Well, let's see. I don't think my mom exercised her creativity when I was a kid. She is very creative. She began painting late in life, but I think she worked too hard to exercise a lot of that in my childhood. I think that most of my creative external input came from probably my friends, in particular Mark and Clark, who are still my friends to this day. And we played D&D together. We talked about the Lord of the Rings obsessively. We talked about the sci-fi and fantasy stuff we were reading. And like I said, we played D&D, and Mark and Clark were both DMs. And, you know, DMing, being a dungeon master or a game master is all about telling a story. And that was a very important part of growing up. And I play D&D to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to Adrian Tchaikovsky talking about that recently. He was also big D&D. It's something I missed here in Ireland completely. I had no idea what it was. So I don't know if people do play it
Re-
here. Maybe they do, but it
recently,
definitely.
you didn't know
Uh,
what it was?
I found out about 2 years ago. I thought it was a
Wow.
video game up till about 2 years ago. So it was completely off my radar here in Ireland. Ireland was a it was a funny place for, I think if Star Trek hadn't got bought by the Next Generation, if that wasn't bought by the national television station when I was a kid, I probably would have missed out on a lot of sci-fi altogether. And you're kind of rooting around the library to find something sci-fi as well. Like it
Sure.
was hard to come by. But
Interesting.
yeah, yeah, it's fascinating to hear about D&D. If we ever meet up, you'll have to show me more about it and teach me a little bit
Oh yeah,
of what it's
I'd
like
be
to be a
happy to.
dungeon master.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, that's the kind of the friends giving you that creativeness as you were a kid. And I guess that leads into what I was going to ask you by the next thing, because I'm fascinated by oral storytelling. And people always, I find a lot of authors talk about books that influence their stories. My next question was going to be, did you have oral storytellers in your life that inspired you to tell stories? I know from my point of view, my mother is probably an oral storyteller, as in she doesn't really have conversations with you, but if she's telling you something that happened, she tells it in a story. She sets it up. There's something happening, and then there's a payoff at the end. And it's interesting. It's only when I thought about it that I realized that that's how she communicates. She turns events that happen into stories to kind of to make them a bit more entertaining. Did you have anyone like that in your life, an oral storyteller?
Well, I think that songs are certainly a form of oral storytelling. And my friends Mark and Clark, we had a band together in high school. We were, so this would have been the early 80s, and we were obsessed with the 60s. This was before the 60s became cool, and this was before the term classic rock even was a thing. I realized that radio here in the States is a lot different than radio in Ireland, I'm sure. But classic rock, the whole concept of classic rock became a thing at a certain point, and then it became all pervasive. But before that, we were really into the 60s. We were really into the psychedelic stuff. We were into the Velvet Underground, which took us, through the back door to Iggy Pop and the New York Dolls, and Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and Television, and the Modern Lovers. And I think all of those artists are storytellers. And so and that was certainly the biggest, that was the music. So I got to back up, because I came to writing in part because I wanted to be a rock star. I very much, I knew that I was going to be a rock star. I mean, I was wrong, but I knew that I was going to be a rock star. I knew that I was going to be a big deal in the world of music. It turns out I wasn't, but the frivolities of youth and the things that we can become obsessed with. But anyway, my point is that I very much came to storytelling from the same place where I wanted to write music. I wanted to tell stories. When I still write music, and I'm still wanting to tell a story to this day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The next question I had lined up for you, and into another later portion of your life where I know you were the owner, editor, and journalist for the Mac Observer for many years. And wanted to ask you, was it the excitement of the innovation at Apple that drew you to that career, or was it more of an interest in telling the story of this technology?
That's a good and interesting question, one that I've never been asked before. First of all, I was the co-owner, so I had a business partner named Dave.
Sorry, co-owner, yeah.
And we were both co-publishers, and I was the editor in chief. Yeah, so I came to TMO by way of a web development company that I had in the mid '90s. I did, you can ask your grandparents' kids, but there was a day when websites were a new weird thing, and there weren't 20 dozen different services you could use to just, whip up a website. And I remember that I was following a young man who had a website called the Cyber Dog Pound that was basically reporting news on CyberDog, which was a browser technology that Apple had in the 90s. And it was all part of this concept called OpenDoc that was this very modular way of doing software where you could basically sort of like plug in modules and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm getting into the weeds. The guy with the Cyber Dog Pound wanted to do a Mac specific site. And I was following him, and he put up a notice like, hey, I've got a super secret project I want to do. So if you want to be involved, give me a writing sample and what you want to do. And I wanted to make his website, because we had I had a website development company, but I submitted my writing sample, and he wanted me to write. He didn't want me to do his website. He wanted me to write, and I ended up accepting that offer and wrote columns for him. And eventually, Dave and I bought that site and changed the name to the Mac Observer, and the rest is history. And we did that for 23 years. But there is, I think that the thing that drew me. Okay, so I'm a terrible journalist. I was always a terrible journalist. I was an excellent analyst. I am very good at piecing together the story from disparate data points. And that's my strength in writing on the journalism side. That is absolutely a form of storytelling. So yeah, I guess that I didn't think of it as that at the time, but in hindsight, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine journalism is quite constrained storytelling in comparison to creative writing, where you've set amount of words, you have to kind of fit in a certain amount of content, and you probably can't be too overly creative in those articles, I imagine, or can you? I guess I'm asking, is there a big difference between those two things?
Well, there's the news story, the news article aspect of a site like the Mac Observer. We
Hmm.
sold the Mac Observer, by the way, in January of 22 or 21. I think it was January 21, 22. I mean, yeah, whatever. There's the news article side, then there's the column side, and those two sides are very different. And the column side, you definitely have a lot more leeway. There is very much on the article side, the news story side. You need to get to the point, and you need to lay it out for your reader. And those are very different. Than fiction is an entirely different beast altogether. And then there's also writing nonfiction books. I wrote several for dummies books. I co-wrote some for dummies books. I wrote a couple of for dummies books, and I contributed to for dummies books, and I edited a couple of them too. And that's a very different form of writing also.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't actually know that. Yeah, I can imagine it's quite different. Just thinking about it there, I would imagine that the creative writing is probably somewhere in the middle from songwriting and journalism, where you've got songwriting is kind of completely unconstrained, as in you can probably say whatever you want in and you don't always have to make a lot of sense in what you say. It's obviously better if you do, but you can kind of you can have a lot of metaphors and a lot of yeah, interesting stuff. Whereas journalism's probably the under or the news stories, at least in journalism, are probably the other end of the spectrum. And I imagine then the creative writing kind of sits somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, like, songwriting, you've got what, 200 to 400 words to tell a story. It's
Hmm.
like it's flash fiction. Um, a news story needs to be between 200 and 500 words, maybe 1,000, and you get, for a column, you usually have about 1,000 words. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, so I have another question for you now, and I guess it's something that I know has affected me in the past. But being creative can be quite all-consuming when you have a project in the works. And have you found that drive to create has affected relationships or other parts of your life when you were kind of in the throes of a project like that?
Yeah, that's true for every creative endeavor
Hmm.
that I've ever been involved with. When I'm interested in something creative, it does become all consuming, and I am sure that it has affected my relationships. You can ask my ex-wife, maybe. Uh, maybe some friends. I mean, I certainly don't think of it as just so I kind of have to answer that more from the context of writing, say, a book. I won't mention any names.
Yes.
And I wrote most of that after my divorce. I started it long before my divorce, but I didn't ever get really serious about it until after my divorce. So it was okay for that to become consuming. It was okay for me for it to become consuming. But there were other creative endeavors while I was married and while I was dating my now ex-wife that did become consuming. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that I'm a person who gets very passionate about the things that I'm interested in. I get very involved in the things that I'm interested in, and sometimes that might be a love interest. That can be my creative interest. That can be my creative output. And then sometimes it might be something else that I'm into.
Yeah.
Maybe even like World of Warcraft. I might have played a little bit too much of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's possibly, and I think a lot of creative people are maybe a little bit neurodivergent. And I think when you are a little bit neurodivergent, I think sometimes you can focus, yeah, a lot on your interests and other things kind of, when you're focusing on something so important to you that you can sometimes forget about other things in your life. And I know one of the big things that happened to you in the last couple of years is that you had a big health scare.
Yes.
I won't say near death experience, but definitely something that would have, well, maybe it was a near death experience. I'm not positive, but it was definitely a major change in your life. And I guess I would ask you, did going through that give you the impetus to get your projects completed, or did it change your attitude towards your creative projects in any way?
Yeah, it did. So what Rohan is referring to, folks, is I had a stroke. It was a bad one. I don't think I had a near death experience per se, but I probably came close to dying. I didn't, and I have since made a full recovery. And although it's so, I don't know if you can tell, but sometimes my aphasia still kicks in, and I'm experiencing that during this discussion, and it really bothers me. I don't know if you can tell, but it bothers me.
I couldn't tell now.
Be that as it may, after my stroke is when I decided that I was going to self-publish. I won't mention the book's name,
Yes.
but that's when I decided I was going to self-publish, because I had been querying for years. I would go off and on where I would send out query letters and I would be really intense about it, and then I would basically sort of let those percolate out there, and eventually they all ended up coming back as reject. I had many requests from agents. I had many full requests from agents, but never got anyone to offer me representation. And after my stroke, it was like, you know what, dude, if you're not going to publish now, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And so I decided to self-publish and got serious about that, and did all the things necessary to be a self-published author.
Yeah,
And that was my point is to your question, that was a direct response and result of having had a serious stroke.
yeah, yeah. And having read the thing we're not talking about, I would say that was a great decision on your part to go ahead and do that. I would imagine that probably it's a very polished article, so I imagine the time you spent querying was time you spent continuously working on that project and improving it over that time. So I'd imagine, even though it didn't bear fruition, it was a very productive period in kind of bringing that manuscript along.
Yeah, it was. So there was one particular agent. She's a treasure. She gave me the most feedback of anyone that I got, and she told me that the middle of the book lost her. So I went back and redid the middle of the book because of that, and that's above and beyond the different revisions that I made throughout, especially the early part of my querying process. But yeah, what was the question?
Yeah, I was, I was just kind of, talking about how the long time querying probably actually made your book a very polished article, and by the time you did get around to self-publishing it. So if you'd self-published it from the start, it probably wouldn't be as strong as it was
Man,
at the end, I imagine.
yeah, can I elaborate on that?
Yeah, please do.
My book was a pile of crap at one point. Obviously, I think all books are probably piles of crap at some point. And I had a friend who was an aspiring writer who was saying, stop it, query. You're done. You're good. Query. And I did. And I should not have, because my book was a pile of crap. And it didn't end. At that point, I thought I was going to write a 2-part story. I thought I had novel 1 and novel 2. And the story that I was telling essentially ends about the halfway point of the current novel. because thought I was going to do that. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. If I had self-published at that point, oh, good Lord, that would have been a travesty. And so I ended up redoing it, and I ended up getting some very key feedback from two people in particular. One who read this early version of the novel said that it starts like a YA book, a young adult book. Because I had Mason waking up in the morning and going through his day. And that was when I learned that there are things I need to write that don't need to be in the book. I need to write them so that I know them, so that I know how my character lives his day, or I know how a scene takes place, but they don't need to be in the book. That was a concept I didn't realize. And then I had another friend of mine who said, "Yeah, I don't know why anyone likes Mason. That's the main character of a certain novel." And I said, well, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, he doesn't do anything." It's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, he doesn't do anything. He just sort of exists in the book, and things sort of happen to him, and he sort of reacts to them. The guy was right. And man, the difference between having cheerleaders for beta readers and having someone who will tell you that your book stinks, that difference is fundamental to becoming a better writer. Yeah, having people that will tell you that your book is flawed, being able to hear that, to learn from it, to make changes and grow as a writer, that's a key aspect of becoming a better writer. And I ended up drastically reworking the book and making Mason more less reactive, more of an instigator, more of the person who's doing things, and not the person who is in the scene and things are happening to him and he's reacting to it. And all of that happened during I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
I think it's a very good point. Beta readers like that will tell you the truth are gold. And
Yes.
you have to, if you want to be a good writer, you have to throw the ego out the window. You can't just be looking for people to tell you how great your writing is, because you're never going to grow. You can take that from somebody who like, if you think your book was a pile of crap at the start, like what my first book was definitely completely in, I'd say, just non-understandable to people. And luckily, I had people who very nicely told me, "Yeah, you need to do a lot of work here," and I learned, and I think I never had an ego about writing, because it was, I always thought I was a very simple writer. So that, luckily, I never really had that ego about my writing, so I was very open to it. But if I hadn't had those people, I never would have got anywhere.
I think there's probably an arc for most people for feedback. For a brand new writer, being encouraged to continue, super important. Then having people who are going to kindly tell you that they like this, but maybe not that so much, that becomes important. And then there gets to a point where you don't have time for anyone who's going to tell you, yes, it's great, but this sucks. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's great. That's good. That's fine. That's good. But this part sucks. You need to fix this shit. Pardon my language. You need to fix this stuff.
You can curse away on this channel.
Okay, good.
It's fine. It's an Irish channel. We fucking curse all the time. So yeah, work away. Don't worry about it.
Good. So anyway, that at this point in my writing, I want this sucks. You've got to address this. You've got, like, yeah, but man, this part right here is just leaving me. You need more. Like, what the hell is your MC doing? I mean, like, I want to get down and dirty with the negative stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
not that I
definitely.
don't want to hear the good things. It's not that I don't need to hear. I am a writer. I am an artist. I have a fragile ego for sure. Maybe you don't, Rowan, but I do. And but I don't care. I want to hear about the problems so that I can make the problems go away.
Yeah, it's all working towards making it better, and anything that moves it in that direction is a positive. And I think even sometimes if that negative even if the negative feedback isn't correct, the fact that you go through it and argue with yourself, and well, actually, I'm right, and you take that negative feedback and you go, right, well, look, and you re-look at it and you go, well, no, I was right. And it still becomes a stronger story because you've taken that feedback and you've implemented. So I think it is so important. I'm going to ask you now, go back to the technology. And I know obviously you talked earlier about your working for the Mac Observer, and before that, where you were very much involved in technology. And I would say that your book is the book that we're not mentioning, there's a lot of technology in it. I think it's very good that it is obviously very well researched and you understand it, and it all adds up, because sometimes you have worlds where there's a lot of technology, but things don't really match up. But you also don't focus on it too heavily, so it's not in there. But how would you say that? So you obviously have a huge interest in technology, and how do you think that mixes with creativity? And does your interest in technology help your creativity, or does it hinder it sometimes in ways?
Yeah, I do love tech stuff. Absolutely love tech stuff. Like, I've got my Apple Vision Pro. That's super awesome and fun. I do think that my love of tech did me well when I was writing a science fiction book. I don't know which science fiction book, but it was some science fiction book. But it was also very important to me to have everything exist in the book in service of the story. Don't like reading books where, in particular, where the narrator, be it the main character or be it, an omniscient point of view, where the narrator is looking at things through my eyes, right? Through my eyes as a reader. I hate reading stuff like that. I want the things to exist from the viewpoint of the character. So, like, having characters walk through all the things that they are doing. So, for instance, let's say, where's my smartphone here? So I got my smartphone, and so I picked up my smartphone and I swiped up from the bottom, and then I looked in the camera to trigger the ID, and stepping through all of the things that we take for granted doesn't make any sense. That's not how technology should exist in a story, because we don't think about those things when we're doing them. Your character should think about them when you're writing them. And I tried to go, I'm not saying that I succeeded. I went to severe lengths to try to always present my technology from the context of the characters to whom it was happening.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I think some really good advice for any authors out there, because I think that really does take you out of the story. And I don't know if I even would have recognized exactly what was taking me out of the story, but it just seems unnatural when somebody's going step by step for something. It's like explaining to you how you walk down a road, they put the left foot front, and
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
something you have to explain to anybody. And even if you're in a far future setting where you're using something that we don't currently have, explaining it's in minutia just makes no sense, because it's just going to take you out of the story. So yeah, I think that is an excellent point. Leading on to that in the future and everything that's going on at the moment. So your work features dangerous artificial intelligence characters. Is it a real fear for you that AI will become something that threatens our very existence? Or do you think it's more likely that the downside will just be, I guess, the erosion of human arts, and take over by AI in more of the creative space rather than actually taking over?
Yes. I think if you look at human history,
Hmm.
there have always and frequently been bad humans who seek power to do bad things and then do bad things when they get that power. Right?
Hmm.
That's surely inarguable. If machine intelligence gains sentience, why would that sentient technology be any different. There will be bad versions of that. So I chose to have my AIs essentially model themselves on people, because people was what they had at their disposal, right? The model that they had was people, and I felt like it made sense to have my AIs essentially be like people, just with different capabilities. Don't see a world where we have machine intelligences and we don't risk that one or more of those machine intelligences will be bad. Will be it from the standpoint of efficiency, like they realize that humans are inefficient and they need to get rid of us, or they simply want more power, or that maybe they want some humans gone, or there are so many ways that machine intelligences can go wrong, and I'm sure that we will probably experience most or all of those ways at some point.
Yeah. That's
so
yeah.
you happy cheery thoughts today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so on that note, on a happy, cheery thoughts, I got to give you a chance now. So being a writer can be quite frustrating. You talked about your many years querying and then obviously we're all on social media trying to gain some kind of foothold into a market that is very difficult to do so. And in a judgment-free zone, I am going to let you have a rant about whatever you want to have a rant about, Waldorf and Statler style, whatever you want. Anything that's annoying you right now. Uh, it's just going to be a rant, and you can have it, and then we're done with it. Okay?
Okay, so I thought this question would come in the form of things that make me mad, and the thing that makes me angry is injustice. I don't like injustice. I don't like people being mean to other people. I don't like bullying at all. Those are the things that will set me off in a rage. And I believe that we should at all times do our best to do the right thing. And I mean, like, in the story, doing the right thing is it's super important to me. And I'm not saying that I always do the right thing. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. God forbid. I am saying that there's no need for people to be actively trying to not do the right thing. That's the worst. And that's the thing that gets my blood boiling, man.
Yeah, can imagine. Yeah, it's tough these days, and I know definitely from my point of view, what we can do ourselves is just do the right thing at our own level and to the people we know and the people we see and that we meet every day, and hope that it that works its way up if we are kind to everybody we meet and we are do the right thing by everybody we meet, no matter who they are. I'd hope that does have an influence, even if we can't affect the big things that are going on, that we can affect the small things, and a million small things can add up to a lot. So that's yeah, I would hope that we can have some effect, and I hope that our work does have some effect on these things, that you can change people's minds and yeah, affect people in some way with our work, even if it's a very simple way. And I think that is the power of stories. And a question, just I guess, for maybe we covered this as a little bit already, but the number one small thing that you've learned in your time as an author that could be very valuable to somebody starting out as a writer. So just a small nugget of advice that proved very valuable to you and that might be very helpful to somebody else starting out on their writing career at the moment.
Well, they're death to pleonasms, right? A pleonasm is any word that if you remove that word from the sentence, it doesn't change the meaning, right? So, for instance, I am going. I'm gonna now find it very difficult to actually come up with an actual pleonasm. It when you at its most simple, I sat down. Down is a pleonasm because if you take it out, it doesn't change the word. I sat. That's not a terrific example from the standpoint of writing craft, but from the standpoint of conveying this concept, that's really crystal clear example. Getting rid of pleonasms has become sort of a life's mission for me, and I strongly recommend, at least because once you're aware of the concept, you can't unsee them, and I see them all the time when I'm reading other people, and I hate it when someone catches it in my writing because I've been so obsessed with getting them out. So like no, how did I leave that in? But anyway, the point is death to pleonasms.
Really good. Excellent. That's an excellent little nugget of advice. If I know when Brian has read over my work, like the most common comment is nix this. So that's all the pleonasms in my work. So yes, we are.
Hold on, because
Yeah.
there usually my nix this comment is because it's unnecessary. But when it's a pleonasm, my note will usually be a pleonasm, and there's a difference. Okay. There's a difference. I think this is worth making clear. There's a difference between something that doesn't need to be there and a pleonasm. Now, a pleonasm is definitely a subset of something that doesn't need to be there. But there are concepts, there are words, there are clauses, there are phrases, there are concepts that don't need to be in your writing. And then there's pleonasms. And pleonasms definitely don't need to be there, but yeah. Nix this is my favorite note, that's for sure.
Yes. It's a term I've never used and I now do use thanks to you. Arsha, thanks to you. I do say nix this a lot, yes. Now it's a nice easy, quick comment to make as opposed to you could do without this or whatever I might have put in previously.
Can we go back a little bit and can I add another piece of advice?
Yes, please do.
The to all writers, please find other writers to work with. I mean, so I have learned the most about my writing from critiquing other authors. But hands down, the most that I have learned about improving my own writing is by critiquing other writers. And usually by then discussing that critique with them. That was something I did a whole lot with the two most important people in a certain unnamed novel is Courtney Washburn, who is, I call her the queen of grammar, and Dimitri Del Castillo, who is the master of plot. And critiquing their work and having them critique my work are the two hands. Like if my book is any good, it's because of those two guys. There are other people. There are probably 20 or 30 people that contributed to my book from helping and editing and catching things, but those two people in particular. And from there, I also have met a crap ton of other authors. And I have critiqued many of them. And every time I critique someone else, I learn more about my own writing. And then having those same people critique my stuff and getting their detailed notes and being able to apply everything that I've learned from other people to what they're telling me. Like this is the thing to do to become a better writer. Like this is even more important than hiring an editor. Yes, you want to hire an editor if at all possible, or if you can get someone who knows what they're doing to edit your book, that's great. But getting those other authors critiquing each other is the thing that will make you a better writer. So I just want to add that.
That's perfect. I think that is an excellent note to end our interview. Thank you so much for your advice. And what I will do now is say congratulations. You did not mention your book, and I will reveal the book now. So here we have a beautiful. I actually have it in hardback, a hardback copy of this because they wouldn't send the paperback to Ireland, so I
Yeah,
got it in
you
hardback.
bought that too. You didn't even let me send it to you.
Yeah, no, no, I bought it, which I'm very glad because it is an excellent book. This is Accidental Intelligence. It's post cyberpunk. Is that fair? I would like to.
I think of it as post cyberpunk. I
Yeah.
advertise it as a cyberpunk. It's categorized as a cyberpunk because there is no post cyberpunk
Mhm.
category. But yeah, I think of it as post cyberpunk in a functional dystopia.
Yeah, I think when you said post cyberpunk, I just thought, yeah, that kind of hits it on the nail because yeah, I would have struggled. I think to it's just not quite cyberpunk for certain reasons, but yeah, post cyberpunk. I think hits the nail on the head, and it follows Mason, who is a private investigator, and he takes on a case that is a lot bigger than he thought initially, as private investigators tend to do. This is one of my favorite reads from last year. The with watertight world building and excellent characters who walk right off the page and into cyberspace, and I would highly recommend this. Do you want to say anything further on your book, Brian? Now that we have it up, now that you're allowed.
No, thank you. I'm simply bathing in your delicious words. That's very kind of you.
Cool. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Brian to being my first victim, as we have been calling it on the Don't Mention the Book podcast. I obviously am not in any way trained in being an interviewer or anything like that. So this is
Oh,
very
you're
much
great.
learning on the job and yeah, awkward pauses at certain stages. So I do apologize for that. But I had a lot of fun tonight. I would, yeah, and I hope this continues. I think through the interview we learned a lot about your process and about your and all that advice. I think was just amazing, and I think this type of interview actually lends to that, where you're learning a lot, and then we kind of find out at the end. So hopefully people enjoy it, and if you have enjoyed it, please do subscribe and like and leave a comment about anything in this. And I'm sure Brian and or myself will get back to you if you want to ask any further questions. You can find us both over on Bluesky and Threads as well if you want to follow us there. And again, we are active there in the writing community and happy to talk to anybody about anything pretty much to do with writing.
By the way, I heard that great theme music you have on this.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to say I have some fantastic theme music at the start. Thanks to Brian for composing the
My
theme music.
goodness. Oh, that was me, wasn't it? Oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I was astounded at the time Brian composed that. He was like, what do you think it here?" And I was like, kind of chilled out with a nice beat in it, and, kind of to reflect the vibe of the podcast." And pretty much 10 minutes later, he had composed and sent me something which was excellent. And you will hear that at the start of the podcast. We might even stick it on at the end, just to so people can listen to it again.
That's great. Thanks.
So, once again, thank you so much, Brian. And thank you so much to everyone who has listened all the way through here today. And I hope you enjoyed it. And as I said, please do comment, and hopefully you will join us again for another Don't Mention the Book podcast. Take care. Good night. Gur Míle Maith agat.